And I don't ever stop my pour. I wiggle in and then I wiggle up.
That's gorgeous.
That's practice. Howdy doody. I'm here with my buddy Joey, who is a new member of the SJCB barista team, and we're going to talk about some barista training, particularly how to steam milk today, and just the ins and outs of how we actually dial an espresso at a Sam James coffee bar.
Sounds good.
Ding. The first thing that I always kind of think about with espresso is creating consistency. Like, we don't want to have accidental coffee, we want intentionally good coffee. So the first step of that is basically like deciding what your recipe is going to be. You're going to decide what your dose is based on the basket. So the dose is going to be the recommended amount that the basket holds. In this case, it's 17 grams. So that's what we're going to set our grinder up to dispense. This is also something to keep in mind too.
It's running low.
When you're running low,
Doesn't
so
push
too will your dose.
Yeah.
So I'm going to grab a scoop of fresh coffee for this. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll be sipping on my espresso.
Doesn't get any fresher than that. Right out of the bucket.
Oh, that's a big scoop.
Well, we're gonna go through it. And if we don't, then I know someone who drinks a lot of coffee. Once you've dialed this in the morning, all the adjustments you make after this are just micro adjustments, like up 0.5, down 0.5. So we have 17.5 grams. I can live with that.
Yeah.
I think if we were making coffee at home, and you have the luxury of like spooning out every half gram to get yourself exactly to 18 or 17, that's nice. But in a setting where we're making 400 coffees in a shift, a half a gram isn't going to be the end of the world. It might mean that your shot runs 2 seconds longer than you had planned for, but I don't think it's going to be something that ruins a good thing. And then I just tamp nice and light. You just want it to be even, and you want this to sort of match up at the rim of the basket. So that there is an even amount of headspace. And then you do want to see that ridge line evenly around it. That represents the level that the screen is going to be at. Now that we know that we have our espresso machine, or our grinder is programmed to dispense a certain amount of coffee, we also want to consider the other input, which is the water. We have this programmed to a volume of water that correlates to this amount of coffee, so that our espresso recipe is considered both in the coffee and in the water. So I do a little purge. It preheats the basket or the shower screen. So I lock in nice and gentle. I don't rough it in or anything. You can damage the puck pretty easily doing that. And then I just immediately pull the shot as soon as I lock in. You have about 8 seconds before it starts to drop, so there's no need to rush. Which is also really helpful if you're making an Americano. You can lock it in, hit that, fill the cup, and then you've saved your customer 8 seconds. Even if your mind is on the milk, the shot is the fundamental base of the espresso drink, and it has to be good. Well, it's so much more fun and engaging to make coffee this way, where your hands are involved in the process.
Yeah.
And for me, like as a customer, like I want to see people make coffee.
Yeah, not press buttons.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a place for it, for the button pushing, but there's something really authentic about making coffee by hand and being involved in the process, having a skill set and knowledge that goes with it. You trust your gut, trust your eye. And when you don't trust your eye, trust the scale. This is just for like barista workflow and just sort of presentation as well. If a cup has a handle, I always want the handle facing out. You don't want to have to reach around the back to grab the handle. And then also whenever I'm pulling shots, especially in paper cups, I always wipe the drip tray before I put it down. Need a coffee?
Yeah.
For me, this butter knife is like very forgiving. It's very easy to work with. The shots taste very similar. They're very sweet, super chocolatey and peanut buttery. Basically anywhere between 28 and 33 seconds. So it's a pretty good window that you can know where you're going to make a pretty great shot.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, in a commercial setting, if you're pulling shot after shot after shot for hundreds of drinks a day, you have to allow yourself a certain amount of variance that is acceptable. I think it's also important to keep in mind like what the drink that the shot's going into is. So if you're making a shot that someone's going to drink as an espresso, it should be in that optimal range. Yeah, even at 27 seconds, it's like chocolatey, peanut buttery, it's sweet. Complex enough to be an espresso, but not so complex that it it becomes diminished when you add milk to it.
Yeah.
It really highlights it with milk.
It goes both ways.
Ah, yeah.
It hits every time.
So just like I kind of explained the inputs that create consistent espresso, there's similar inputs that create consistent quality milk. Those inputs are milk itself and then hot steam. So if you can control the amount of steam and the amount of milk, you, give or take, can control the texture every single time. No matter whether you do a great job texturing it or a poor job texturing it, both of those milks are going to come to the temperature at the exact same amount of time. What steps of this do I prioritize to achieve the best outcome? And the main one is going to be how much steam you get into it early. Faster you stretch the milk from cold to the stretch volume before you start the whirlpool,
Yeah.
the better the texture is going to be. It's like the more you churn ice cream, the creamier it gets. Except with this, you have a time limitation on how much you can churn for because it's going to get too hot and burn.
Yeah.
You want to use the correct pitcher, obviously, for the right drink as well. So if you're making a cappuccino, you would use a smaller pitcher like this 12-ounce one. If you were making a 10-ounce or 12-ounce latte, you'd want to use the bigger 20-ounce pitchers. If you were making 2 lattes, you could use an even bigger pitcher, but for the most part, we are using just the 12 and 20-ounce pitchers and steaming every single drink one at a time. It's a little bit labor intensive to do it that way, but you get a better product, and we get to really control exactly what we want. So instead of, doing a large jug and splitting it, where one latte might have a thicker texture than the other one because of the foam that got split, I'd prefer to just make sure that our customers get exactly what they ordered and that we're happy with the drinks that we're making. Starting with the right amount of milk, let's start with a cappuccino now. But we're going to take this let's say it's 4 ounces of milk. It's cold milk. We're going to add some steam, which is going to increase the volume. I think you're better to do that as fast as possible while the milk is still cold, and to try to get that volume up to where you want it, about 15-20% increase in volume, and then let it whirlpool. So if you are aggressive with the stretch in the beginning to achieve the volume you want, from that point on, you're just spinning it, and you're taking those large steam bubbles that you introduced at the very beginning and turning them into a silky microfoam through more and more whirlpool. So before I do this, I just want to talk about holding the pitcher and the importance of that. I like to hold the pitcher with these fingers here, not like this. If you sort of cradle it like this, it swings off of the momentum of your fingers instead of being rigid.
Yeah.
This is like drawing with a pencil. This is like drawing with a liquid because it mimics the natural flow of the water. So I think you can end up with much prettier, more natural looking latte art if you let it swing naturally. Instead of trying to etch it, you end up with those rosettas that look like a fish skeleton.
Yeah. That's a good tip.
So that's a big one. And I see that a lot where people just don't hold this correctly. When you hold it like this, it works really easy with the flow of your wrist instead of off the flow of your whole arm. I don't steam like this. When you steam like this, you kind of have to work with the angle of the steam wand, and you typically end up having the tip of this closer to the wall. If I'm using my palm to gauge temperature, and it's right at the hot spot where that's touching, it's gonna feel hotter than it actually is. And so I prefer to have the back of the steam wand touching the edge of the pitcher, but keeping it basically centered so that the tip of the steam wand sits in the center of the milk, which is where the whirlpool is going to be anyways. And then you can adjust the spin of the whirlpool with a slight left or right tilt without having to do this. If your milk is spinning and you're on this much of an angle, that milk's coming off the side. So you're better off to keep the pitcher as level as possible, using as minimal a tilt as you can. And then I always hold the pitcher with my left hand so that the spout of this sort of sits resting on the web of your hand here. That means that your palm is always feeling for temperature and that your right hand is always ready to turn it off. But as you do that, as you're feeling it's getting too hot, you turn it off and then switch hands so that your right hand goes from this motion right here and then out, and then you can grab this and clean it before it ever gets a chance to actually like harden up and cake on here. Which you've ever seen a lot of coffee shops. Sometimes the front's clean and then you flip it around and you're like, whew, that's
Yeah.
a lot of buildup that doesn't get seen. So I'm always careful to wipe the back, purge, and then try to rub the cloth along the bottom of the tip here. And then you also want to make sure that the rag you're using is moist. If it's dry, let's see if I have a dry one around here. Actually, this one's pretty dry. If it's dry, that steam's going to go right through and burn your palm. So if the rag you're using has enough moisture, it's going to be dense enough that it sends the steam at the bottom. And then another thing about steaming milk, it takes about 10 seconds for that to happen. The shot takes about 30. So there's a 20-second, give or take, gap between when you start the shot and when you start this. And I always like to make sure that my shot is pulling well first. So if I get the indicators visually that it's looking good, then I'll start to steam my milk. So I purge a little bit of steam out just to make sure there's no moisture. I switch hands so that my left is gauging for temp. And I introduce steam in the beginning aggressively, let it rise in volume. And as soon as it's hit the volume I want, I sink it just below the surface, wait till the temperature is good, and then I switch hands.
And you said 15 to 20% increase in volume, or?
Yeah, about a 15, 20%, like, depending on the drink too. Like if it's a cap, you can probably go more like 25% increase because you want that extra like plush flavor. But if it's a latte or a flat white, something with a wetter texture, you'd want to go a little less. Like this is probably too thick for a latte, but it's perfect for a cappuccino. Because you've added air to it, air is lighter than milk. So they're going to want to separate pretty quickly, and you can keep them together by spinning at this. But I always add a little bit first to the espresso. It helps the espresso bond with the protein so that the surface of the drink doesn't oxidize as quickly. And then I hold my arms at my sides like this so that my elbows are basically on my ribs. And then I tilt the pitcher, or tilt the cup towards the pitcher. And I start from high. And when I went latte, I just get low enough, and then I draw through. I know you want to learn how to...
Do a rosetta?
Is it rosetta
Yeah.
that you want to do? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me show you a rosetta, and I can kind of explain how it all works, but it all starts from this.
Yeah.
So if you can create the heart, then you can create contrast. Unless you can get the contrast to grab onto the crema, you can't create a rosetta. There's a few things that will ruin the rosetta once you start it as well, but starting it is the hard part. And so I'll show you how, a couple tricks how you can do that. Okay, so kind of in the center, increase the volume. So to create the rosetta, you kind of have to create the contrast in the middle of the cup and then push it to the bottom. So it's different from a heart. So you start here and you're sort of pushing it down and then working your way back up.
Nice.
I always use my left hand to gauge for temperature. Again, you're right, or you're left-handed, so it might work differently for you, but the direction of the dial doesn't change, so I would recommend keeping it that way. And I would turn it this way.
This way.
So that if your left hand's on there,
But
as soon as you feel it too hot, your right hand's ready to shut it off and grab the handle.
This. on the
What you'll
back.
notice, like if you're straight level like this, the whirlpool has no direction. You want to go either left if you want to spin counterclockwise or right if you want to spin clockwise. But it doesn't have to be an extreme angle. It just needs to be slight. So try to keep closer to the center and make sure these are always touching. That keeps you centered instead of being too close to this wall, which is what causes the turbulence. See how it's already whirlpooling?
Yeah.
It's going to rise on its own, and then just let it finish.
All right, so you said
So if you
Elbows
keep
to the side.
Yeah, you don't want them to be out like this, because then you can move things around weird. You want to fix positions so that the only angle you're doing is that this tilts towards this, and then as you're finishing it, this just levels out.
Okay. Oh, it might be too thin.
There's not very much contrast. It's it's kind of murky as far as where it starts and begins. So a little bit thicker milk that actually matches the texture of the espresso is what's going to cause them to grab onto each other with a pretty clear, distinct contrast. And from that contrast, I think you just need to slow down, really.
That's also hard.
Yeah.
It's like as soon as it hits, my brain just.
Just try to, if you're thinking about slowing down, slow down twice as much as you're thinking about slowing down, instead of like really slow it to where you're almost like not even moving. That makes a big difference. Have you ever seen how Masa at Harvard mixes? I'll show you. He does like 3 loops basically. So it's just 3 big swoops back and forth. And his rosettas are beautiful. They're not stacked like mine are like this. They're like 3-dimensional.
Yeah.
And Joey, here, this is the other thing. I keep this pretty close to here so that I'm not here. I'm here. That means that it tilts this way. And you can start slow. Introduce it into there. You hear that ripping paper sound? You don't need too much of that. And then you just go a little bit below that surface. It's spinning in a whirlpool from the start. And wait till it's too hot or getting too hot. And then you switch. The texture you want is latex paint. Add a little bit. You don't need too much. If you add too much, then you just give yourself less time to fill.
Yeah.
Making sure that they're both spun before you start pouring. And then you tilt this towards the pitcher. Create contrast, nice and slow.
That's beautiful.
So as you go slower, these leaves actually get bigger and more defined. And you can see a little bit of dimension now. So there's like a little bit of contrast within the leaf. It looks like an actual leaf. And then you can slow down and stop at the top to create that heart. Or you can just drive right through. Something I see a lot of baristas doing is that as they are finishing the latte art, the draw through, they tend to draw through like an airplane taking off on a diagonal. So they're going from the very top and ripping up like that.
Yeah.
That's it's not going to give you the best results. The best results are going to be if you're more like a helicopter taking off.
Like right away.
So as you finish the top here, stop, lift up while maintaining the same stream of pour, and then cut across. What that gives you, like if you just look at how this looks, this is the widest point of the spout right here. So the stream is going to be widest. Down here is the finest point of the stream. So if you're further away from the drink, you've got a fine point pencil to finish with instead of a Sharpie. And that's what will give you that really nice stem that runs through that almost just sort of disappears into nothing.
So this is like how I usually do it?
Yep.
And
Just try it like this instead.
this, okay.
So that it's more in the center. It makes it easier to control because it's not going to spin as fast. It's still going to spin, but it's not going like crazy around the sides of the wall.
All right.
Okay. And now just get a little lower and let it spin. And when it's too hot, right hand, switch hands.
Okay.
That turned out great.
Yeah? Better than first time.
Well, and I think it's easy to overcomplicate this process by like having too many angles and too many like variables involved. All it needs to do is rise in volume, spin. If you can do that with fewer steps, you will always have much more predictable outcomes.
Yeah.
Like that's perfect.
All right.
And then just go half the speed that you want to go.
Let me try to remember that when I pour.
Just really slow it down. And get your contrast first. Slower.
Slower.
Push, now wiggle. Work your way back.
Okay, it'll be a heart for now.
But you're starting to get the striation, the
Yeah,
wiggle,
and the contrast is better.
way better.
Yeah.
So like, you're like 5 drinks away from getting the rosetta that you want, just by slowing down a little bit.
So when you say push, like, it doesn't click in my head yet.
Push, I mean, is sort of like, it's creating that grab, right? So like, you have to find a way to make the stream of milk that's going into a flat surface connect in some sort of way. And I think that the best way to do that is to think about it like if you're diving into a swimming pool. This is the pool, this is you. If you dive from super far, you're gonna make a big splash and you're gonna sink through. If this is the pool and you're diving from the surface, like from the deck, you're probably not gonna sink through. So if you think about it like that, that's what you're doing as you're getting closer to the crema, is you're creating the ability to sit on the surface instead of sinking through it. And you really don't want to be up here trying to pour latte art from this far away because there's so much velocity, you're going to create bubbles and like too much turbulence. So you want to start from the appropriate distance, and then when you want to lay on the surface, get closer. And that is easily achieved by just getting into the tilted pitcher or into the tilted cup with the pitcher with the spout of it. So if this is level, it's really hard to actually get into there. So you can create the contrast sooner by tilting this towards it and then pushing. And that push is sort of like a combination of changing the flow rate into it at a certain distance. That creates that that white blob that you can now manipulate through wiggling or through more pushing. So the more you push, the bigger the heart gets. Or if you push and wiggle, you'll create that sort of wiggly base for the rosetta that you can start at that you could start it here and push it there and then wiggle it back.
So I should wiggle as I move backwards.
As you're moving back, so you're creating the contrast, pushing it to the start, and then wiggling back to the top to create those leaves. And then you lift up and take off. See how it's more turbulent?
Yeah.
You want to switch the angle so that it's a constant whirlpool instead. You don't want like waves, you just want the pool. So that is going to take some time to figure out what the sweet spot is. But once you know, it's always there. It's the same sweet spot every time. Wiggle on your way back. Closer.
Okay.
Like that's the very beginnings of a rosetta. You just did one loop.
Yeah.
Keep going.
But I still can't slow down.
Well, I think what you're doing is you're getting scared. So you're like kind of shaking a little too fast. Slow it right down and try to really bring those loops wide. But not in a etching way, like in a wiggle way. So that it's just rocking off your wrist. So let it rock more. Try to keep it like here. Just imagine the whirlpool's already going around it and just keep it in that spot. So stretching from here, and then don't change anything about the angle, just change the depth.
Up and down.
You'll see I use my pinky finger on the back, almost like an adjustment dial or something. That helps me adjust up or down. Okay. Yeah.
Do you think we'll get a rosetta today?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Your last one was pretty close.
Okay, I hope.
Okay. And push forward and then wiggle back. Nice and loopy.
It's abstract.
I mean, you've got dimension
Yeah.
leaves here for the first time.
Yeah.
This is great. Like, this is progress.
Nice. I think this is
Like, you've gotten better at each one each time, so
okay. We're seeing evolution happen.
Darwin's espresso game.
It's fun when you get the hang of it.
Well, you don't want to beat yourself up over it either, right? Like, there's no point in being ashamed of not being able to pour the latte art you want to, especially if you know that the drink is really good.
Yeah.
The latte art is just like the final cherry on top. Like it's the presentation aspect of it. And it's the fun part.
It's just, I've been making coffee for so long and I've never been able to master that. It would be nice if we can get there.
Well, you're lucky to be making coffee in the like internet age.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first learning how to pour latte art, it was like you had to go onto like latte art and barista forums to like get any information about it. There wasn't a lot on YouTube yet.
And it was all like still descriptions, not videos for you to watch.
Yeah, it was really difficult. It took me a long time, but I think back about that really fondly because it was fun. So you want to stay close is the
Yeah.
other thing. So you don't want to get too far away because then that contrast starts to get a little foggy.
I lost the contrast.
So as long as you stay close, like what I do when I'm pouring latte art, I keep these touching. Like you can hear it scratching. That ensures that you don't ever get too far away to lose the contrast. That would be my next suggestion. So I think if you try that, you're gonna get a rosetta.
Okay.
You're getting the damn rosetta.
Okay.
All right, go for it. Stay close, stay close.
I'm scared I'm gonna spill it, so I
It's
keep...
okay to spill. It's a coffee shop.
Yeah. That's something.
See? It's a little bit more like ribs, but you're getting closer and closer every time. A little bit of milk. Give it a spin. Then I don't ever stop my pour. I wiggle in and then I wiggle up.
That's gorgeous.
That's practice.
It's just one continuous...
If you break your pour, it can separate. So if you just keep it going, nothing separates, nothing breaks.
I also noticed you like angle your cup as you go.
Yeah, so I tilt it towards the pitcher to start so that I can get the nose of this in there sooner. Because the earlier you start pouring latte art, the better the latte art is, the bigger the latte art can be. And it's just, it's like an insurance policy at the end that you're not gonna like overfill the cup. Like you've already completed the latte art, as you're finished it, then it's just drawn through. That's your best yet.
Yes. I felt it.
Like, look at the texture, it's perfect. Just introduce a bit of milk to the pitcher. Okay, so basically, just hold it like you would. I'm gonna just handle the guide. So you're going like this, you create the contrast, and then you just wiggle back. Slow, and then,
Ooh,
yeah.
that was perfect.
But you get a better sense of like how slow you actually
Yeah.
have to go and how wide you want those like wiggles to be. And then again, it's going to be practice. You know, like it took me 20 years to get to this point, and I'm still learning stuff. So it never really ends.
I'm gonna have this. All right.
Cool. Well, I'd say that's a very good introduction. You're only
that's
going to get
good.
better from here, but it's going to take practice, and you already have a pretty good starting base. So
Yeah.
well done.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you again soon.
All right.